All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Jean has asked me to give you a kind of very high-level view about this TIPS model, but I want to just tell you what the genesis of TIPS is, because it's actually quite important. So in 1992, a group of us met with Nelson Mandela, and he expressed at Shell House, and he expressed very serious concern that when a new transition was going to take place in this country, there would be a huge flight of technology out of the country. And we, together with Mandela, got his sanction to run a program called Technology Top 100, which is now the biggest business awards program in the country. It is owned by Da Vinci. It is run by Da Vinci on behalf of the South African government. And every year, we interview between 90 to 100 or 80 to 100 companies using a model. And what happened is that over the years, we started to gather data. And the whole idea about the program was more to try and find out what we called the story behind the story. What are these organizations doing in South Africa to be globally competitive, to survive, to thrive? And eventually it happened on a Saturday morning. Benny and myself and a group of us got together and said, what are the kind of converging stories that are coming out of these organizations? And we realized that the successful companies, the ones, and they don't have to be the big companies, the small, medium, and large companies, were all focusing on these four dimensions: the management of technology, the management of innovation, the management of people, and the S is within a systemic environment. And as a result of that, we have developed this TIPS model. And we unashamedly talk about it as the key drivers for any business. It doesn't matter whether you're in manufacturing, if you're in software development, if you're in the medical area, if you're in the financial services area, or the insurance area, wherever it is. We believe that if you want to be a manager and a leader in an organization, you better understand how to manage technology, manage innovation, manage people, and within a systemic environment. And so I've been asked to take you through the philosophy, and I'm going to give you a couple of slides talking to you about what we try and achieve in the classroom, because I don't think anybody here has a TIPS lecture. There's nobody here. Okay, so what I want to start this. Here's a PhD student of ours, gives us a bit of grey hair, but he's starting in his PhD. He turned around and he said, the battle for relevance is not the strongest of the species that survive or the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. And so the key driver is really looking at technology to which we want to be able to give the customer new tools, new rules, new ways that they can actually do their work properly. You all are aware of what Adler said, and it's the massive challenges facing us. And what we've tried to do within this TIPS model is to try and sensitize the students towards these huge complexities, really, really major challenges, no longer linear, and that we actually have to look at what we're going to do. Organizations' scarce resource becomes their dreamers, not their testers, and that's an important thing. Just a bit of fun. One of the biggest challenges in South Africa is we've always been told that it's first world versus third world technology. Well, I thought you should see what Federal Express did as well. So it doesn't only happen in the third world, where if you don't load your vehicle properly. Okay, I think the other important thing which Benny tries to emphasize all the time, when people say, I'm at Da Vinci, I'm teaching an MBA class, we are not MBAs. We are not producing managers who in fact understand business management. We are producing managerial leaders who have a deep insight into what we believe are these four core drivers of a business: technology, innovation, people, and systems. And I think it's also important to note that what we try to emphasize in all of this is that this notion that you have these clever top executives in an organization developing the next strategic intent, and then going and bringing the tame technology people in and saying, how do we actually make that strategic intent happen? Whereas now what you're doing is that technology informs and dictates strategy decisions. So that is a critical factor. We are trying to take a very foreign concept in South Africa, by the way, this notion of technology. I'm sure that all of you, in the moment we talk about technology, we have to try and dispel this myth that we're talking about hard stuff. We'll show you just now, we're talking about very soft stuff. I'm not interested in how you make Langton's computer. I'm more interested in finding how I can use Langton's computer to actually gain competitive advantage. So we are not, and there's a distinct difference. If you go and do a master's degree in technology management at Pretoria University or Stellenbosch University or University of Pennsylvania, anywhere around the world, you will do what we call hard technology. And ours is very much around soft technology. So don't come to Da Vinci and say, but I don't know how things work. We're not interested. We want to get ingrained into you a philosophical approach. So the TIPS model starts off very fundamentally with the organization as a system. And I need to just say to you, and I'll reinforce this later on, we also have a fundamentally different approach towards systems thinking. So when I first did my first course of systems thinking at the University of Witwatersrand, the professor stood up there and he said, if you want to understand systems, understand the human body. If I walk outside there and I fall down the set of stairs and I sprain my left ankle, my right leg will carry more weight. And they spoke about this self-organizing characteristic. We are only interested in, so that's a biological system. But the interesting thing is that we are interested in social systems, and we'll talk about that, and that's very important. So when we ask top executives at Technology Top 100, how do you manage your organization from a systems point of view, we are concerned about more about how they actually create what we call some form of organization ecology, and I'll explain that to you as well. When we talk about the T, you will see there it's deliberately a small t. We learned this from a colleague of Benny's who spoke about the small t, that we differentiate between the hard technology, how do you make that spacecraft or that computer or this room, whatever the story is. And here we talk about the tools and the metrics to achieve differentiation. Where we talk about this innovation space or the ideation space, we have a very, very different approach towards this whole notion of innovation. And certainly I need to tell you that this concept that you will learn, and I'm being highly critical of business schools because I have lectured there, they'll turn around and say, you want to create an innovative environment, you must trust your people. Well, in Technology Top 100, some of the companies that have the worst human resources management processes are the most innovative. So, you know, there's a whole concept of what we call managing by fear, and it happens to work in certain organizations. When we link the technology, the systems, and the innovation, we start getting some idea about profits and value return. And I don't want anybody to leave here to think that Da Vinci is not concerned about the profit margin or the financial elements of those organizations. If we now link the technology and the innovation space, we're saying this talks about agility. We are concerned about how flexible these organizations are. Are they able to respond to change? Are they in fact able to cope with what we call the new world flexibility? So what we try and reinforce in the classroom is this notion that if you get yourself completely hidebound by a linear approach, you will get yourself into trouble. When we then go to the P, the people part of it, we try to encourage the notion of the human technology interface. What we're saying is exactly that opening slide. We cannot accept that you actually just go out there and deliver or develop technologies which are not looked at from a people point of view. And so we start talking about the cost of incentives and variable pay. And we explore in detail in Technology Top 100 what are organizations doing, and I'll give you a couple of slides, to create those key people who are going to constantly innovate, develop new ideas, come up with new ideas as well. And what we say is that if you have an engaged organization, you will find that the innovation and the people side becomes a very important determinant. And there, what we say is that they must be creative, you must motivate, and we're obviously also concerned about people retention and people attraction strategies and all those things. If I link the technology and the people side, I talk about alignment. Critical. Don't go and develop technology where you haven't considered your customers or your people within your own organization. Don't bring in new technology into an organization Da Vinci struggles enough with Moodle. How much are we actually talking about creating an environment where we've got the right people, or we're trying to get our people to look at that? And so here's, are the skills in place, matching new technology to skills needs and developing from within. Now in Technology Top 100, we talk about this as being a hyper-competitive organization. If you manage all, and that's another distinct difference, by the way. If you will go and have a look at some of the managerial theories, they will turn around and say, maybe you could be excellent in one of those, or excellent in two of those, but you can't be excellent in all four of those. And we suggest to you that this approach must or requires you to be excellent in all four of those. So when an organization is actually looked at as a hyper-competitor, we will look at other interesting things like, are they entering into joint ventures? Are they looking into alliances? So I want you to get a feeling that this is the 21st century, that we expose those students who are coming into you guys for specialist knowledge. We want them to understand these as being the key drivers. So we won't talk too much about that. I think it's also important that the S really looks at the organization as a profit point of view, and that's kind of important. Now, this is not the full picture. So what we try to do then is to explore and expose our students to another four important elements. The first one is what we call the contribution to organization ecology. What are you doing in your organization to take this notion of the organization as a system and creating an environment that organization has what we call this notion of self-organizing characteristics? How do you create an organization that actually has drivers that are really co-designed by the people that make them want to work in there? Making a difference to communities is critically important. The environmental issues are important. And when we talk about South Africa, we also want people to be aware of economic employment equity, broad-based black economic employment, job creation, and those things. And when we end off, we say that this is a sustainable organization. Now, Benny's engaged at the moment with a pretty interesting initiative in South Africa to look at maybe what we should be doing is taking the whole notion of sustainability, which at the moment is driven on the triple bottom line. You know, your ecology, your people, and your environment, and, economy, people, and environment, and really saying, how can we add value by saying that if you and I have got excess cash, and we want to know where we should best invest our money, maybe an organization that goes through, and we are striving to develop what we call a Da Vinci number, that if a company comes on and has got a 9 out of 10, you'd rather put your money in there to an organization that might have 5 out of 10, because the one that's 9 out of 10 actually manages their organization from this tips point of view. What you also need to understand is that we have piles of data. Every year, between 60 to 90 companies, we pour in this information. And what we try to do in those 4 modules is constantly energize or re-energize those modules with new ideas, new thinking. And I'd submit to you, without being too arrogant, that this TIPS model has made Da Vinci a very, very sort of attractive partner to some of the global universities, which we can tell you about who are our partners. Now, if you did a course on the management of technology at Harvard, and you would in fact talk about the big T. So in the conventional approach, the classical university one, they really are primarily concerned about the developers of technology. I need to be able to expose the students to some of the key drivers that are going to make that computer work. Safety, cost, delivery, Dell, it's a Dell computer, and we'll talk about the Dell case study, this amazing distribution. In Da Vinci, we are really also looking at both users and developers of technology. They are not interested in the system, we are interested in the system. So if you go and you have a look at this, as I've extracted from the Harvard Management Technology notes, they will say, the classic example is IBM with its PC, and it talks about what the drivers were when IBM developed the PC. In Da Vinci, we want the students to say, who controls the PC market? It's not Lenovo, Dell, Apple. It's in fact Intel, and in the case of most of the computers, it's Microsoft. So whether you like it or not, all your computers are packaged around an Intel chip and Microsoft operating system. We want our students to actually explore that. We don't want them to only look at that. We want them to look at Apple and its niche market. So in the management of technology module, we try to get them to understand there's something much bigger. And of course, we then tell to them about how IBM screwed up. And they actually spent $20 billion retrenching 200,000 workers because they failed to see the digital revolution. And then, of course, as you know, what happened is that IBM sold to the Chinese and came out of this thing. We then talk about this Da Vinci competitiveness model, and just to not to spend too much time, but we talk about, first of all, how do we find the business. We are concerned about how competitive they are from an innovation point of view. We talk about the value chain. We talk about competitive intelligence, new product and process development, commercialization, and improvement. We look at time compression. Just once again, a snapshot. And a lot of the stuff comes out of the technology top 100. So it's relevant. And it's not stuff that you're going to find in textbooks. This is pre-textbook stuff. It's stuff that is hard-nosed, works in businesses, and we are able to pick that up. So when we talk about this, we talk about smart organizations. So a lot of the stuff that Benny talks about, that we talk about in some of the tips modules, is all around a key thing is that we want to achieve a purpose. The next driver is understanding the environment, and the other one is how do you mobilize resources. So what we try and emphasize is that alignment and empowerment is important. That disciplined decision-making, Benny was talking about this decision-making issues, which we are looking at some very exciting stuff around that. Open information flow, outside-in strategic perspective, embracing uncertainty, systems thinking, continual learning, value creation culture, and creating alternatives. And we hope that certainly at the senior levels, at Masters and PhD, they walk out and are able to actually articulate this around their business, around where their businesses should be able to go to. Just because Benny was talking about this whole notion of managerial leadership, we will enforce this concept of the strategy tactics, where this is the management side, doing things right. And what we show the students is how many organizations have the most unbelievable management team. They can, as Benny says, they can tick those boxes. They are really good at what they're doing, and yet they die because their strategy, doing the right things, is fundamentally flawed. And so that's where our managerial leadership notion comes into it. We're saying you cannot continue with a mindset that is actually highly relevant, dominant in many universities where they distinguish that there's a management category and a leadership category. Because if you don't understand the strategy tactics matrix, you can die very, very quickly. We also talk about, when we look at the innovation, and it's a pity Colin's not here, as I said to you earlier on, we have a really different view about innovation. And when we start talking about an organization, we want to know how, as I said to you earlier on, agility, alignment, and engagement. And so when we look at it, we talk about this in the classroom, we talk about this notion of a capabilities framework, where we try to explore all the elements that actually happen within the organizations. So when you look at competitive innovative strategies, have they got intelligence systems? And we'll show you later on, we talk about those things. Because there are not many businesses in South Africa that use competitive intelligence, but a lot of the businesses that we interview in Technology Top 100 will use these techniques. So we try to explain all these issues with them. I think also importantly, and not to sort of overemphasize the innovation stuff, is all of these things in the middle over here. And you'll see as I go along, we try to keep these things in mind, that you've got a whole lot of good ideas, and how do you get value out of that? And within the classroom, there's lots of discussion, mainly around how successful organizations in South Africa go about it. So you'll see over here, for example, we talk about skunk works. What do organizations do to create an environment within their organization that people actually want to come to work? And they take ownership of the business and they feel that they are partners in that business. I think importantly, we also talk about what comes out of Technology Top 100 is, this kind of most successful companies focus primarily on being a company. We talk about this, and this comes out very strongly, about how do you sit down and actually beat yourself. Really review what you did yesterday and what can you do better today than what you did yesterday. And that's an important thing. Just some of the tools, so you don't get the feeling that this is all warm and fuzzy. We will talk about S-curve analysis. And this is a tool that is old but is becoming very, very relevant now. How do I know when I'm making a huge amount of money over here that I need to now actually start diverging into a new area? And so we talk about a lot of these different terms in innovation. We've just got a student who's just submitted her PhD, and if she's successful, she's done a huge investigation around open innovation in ESCOM and looking at some of those tools. So what we will show is that a lot of South African companies just try to continuously improve themselves. In Da Vinci, there's all the time what we call developing this new S-curve. How do we constantly look at what we have to do to be relevant and create an environment that when the students walk out of Da Vinci, they are at the cutting edge of what's happening around the world. Hence, no textbooks. That's a mindset that we have to, it's a huge problem. I want my textbook. I'm at university, I want my textbook. No textbooks at Da Vinci. When we talk about the value chain, clearly what we're saying over here is that all the time we talk about an interdependent system or network of activity. So everything that we look at, and that's why I've suggested, maybe we should just expose you to a half day on systems thinking. Because everything that we look at is from a systemic point of view. Not a systematic point of view, from a systemic point of view. So when we look at the value chain, we will look at these key drivers, once again to show you that we are concerned that you need to make money in your business. Or if you're in a social business, what's the margin, how you make an improvement to people, whatever the story is. And then we'll talk about all these value chains and explain to the students with each one of them, that is a system. And how do you go about managing? Because as you know, nowadays, the most dominant area where people are trying to make more and more money is actually managing the value chain. Once again, important. The competitor intelligence, very, very important. And we try to emphasize this notion. If you go to the Rothman School of Business now, and in Toronto and Canada, they have a whole department now on what they call CI, competitor intelligence. Notions of war rooms and all of those good things. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how critical it is now because we are overpowered with data. How do we actually now take 20% data and get 55% intelligence out of it? And we show them the processes, and they're expected to appreciate that and do some reading on that. We also talk about forecasting, Delphi techniques, foresighting, and for example, foresighting, once again, relatively limited use in South Africa, but a tool which is very, very powerful, and we will show them some of the areas. We also talk about a very, very important thing around technology selection and stage gates, and we sit down and we explain to the students how many organizations will have a very disciplined process of developing new products, but always make a fundamental mistake that they always think that the end is to develop this new widget. And what we try to show them is that interesting technology top 100 companies will get to a particular stage gate and say, our original intention was to develop a new pointer device for computers, but actually we've come out with something that's fundamentally different, trying to show that if you start looking at these things from a systemic point of view, you are able to get some wonderful opportunities out of it. New product development, critically important, has become huge now. So if you go and you look at Discovery Health or banks, they actually have a research and development department. And so we talk to them about ANZOF and talk to them critically about what we call this diversification segment, once again to show you that we don't ignore tools that are relevant. But what we don't want the students to do is to come out and just have textbook approach. We talk about this in the classroom and how they're going to do it. I think this is a fundamentally important area, particularly from a South African perspective. As you probably know, we have the worst the lowest commercialization index in the world, the highest in terms of the propensity to develop new ideas and new concepts, but the lowest in terms of commercialization. This is once important to just reinforce that we have international partners. So we have, for example, a partnership with the Technology Innovation Group in the United States of America, who really are specialists in commercialization, and when and as needed, we will bring them out to South Africa because they have hands-on experience on commercialization. So this would be typically their process. I know this will make many ill because it's very linear, but what I've done is I've actually transformed it into a systemic process, but I won't bore you too much. But what we try to do is to once again sensitize the students, not give them the experience, say, there is some critical stuff that you need to think about. Introduce them to new tools that are being used. Around, this is what our American partners have developed. It's called Immunotherapy. And what happens is how you actually are able to get them to understand issues around intellectual property and key things like that. You don't go and get a great idea from somebody without doing the proper research. And then we show them, this is a wonderful case study from our American partners who got engaged with a hospital in Texas, and this hospital was in the process of developing a very interesting cancer vaccine. So they'd come out with this vaccine, they'd done some clinical trials, and now the hospital decided maybe they should commercialize it. And how, using that immunotherapy, how you can actually get together and start finding out that, for example, in this particular area, there were 25 already patented technologies. So don't play in that area. Look over here, for example, where you've got limited competition. Once again, to show them, viewing it from a systemic point of view because of our failure to really appreciate commercialization. When we look at the improvement side, which is the I, we talk about how we've moved in this world from cost strategies to quality to what we can do in terms of technology innovation to customer focus, and we talk very passionately about this new corporate strategy, which we call the most for less cost in the least time. So in other words, this is time compression, and we show them some important issues around what a competitive organization does from a time compression point of view. And then we show them something that's very interesting. And we picked up this from McDonald's. So if you look at here, McDonald's were trying to see what they could do from an innovation and a technology point of view to improve the throughput at a McDonald's outlet. And what you see over here is that they actually were able to take out 19 seconds out of the toasting process. Because you go to McDonald's in America, the bun is toasted. And by actually looking at the physical challenges facing having a high temperature toaster, they found that the people that were supplying them with the buns, that consistency of the flour and all of that made up the buns was not able to withstand the high temperature toaster. So they got together, and from a management of innovation, technology, and look at the system, they were able to actually come out with a new consistency and take 19 seconds out. Also very important in this thing, they got their staff involved. So from a systems point of view, we try to encourage once again this underlying theme, look at your organization from a systems point of view. And that saved them $100 million. And that, we just showed them the sort of numbers of McDonald's stores in the United States of America, which is a bit scary. In time compression, just because it's interesting, we get them to, in their post-module assignment, they are expected to produce what we call a time-based process map. We want them to go into their organization, look at the system, and come back to us and show us how they were able to actually make a meaningful sort of contribution to the organization. For example, a group of ESCOM students, year before last, did an analysis that when a particular post in ESCOM falls vacant, it takes ESCOM between 9 to 11 months to fill that vacancy. And they used this time compression technique and interrogated every part of the system within ESCOM and were able to come out. So the whole idea of this is to take out what we call non-value added time and how you actually can do this and manage it. I was also asked to tell you that what we have also done now is we've taken our systems thinking course at master's and PhD level and added a significant new component called design thinking. So I'm just going to give you a high-level overview of that as well. And if we do this half day, we'll spend a bit more time on the detail. Just by the way, a lot of the work that we talk in systems thinking has been done in partnership between Da Vinci and the Ackoff Collaboratory at the University of Pennsylvania. A lot of you have probably read about Ackoff. Ackoff was a highly controversial professor at Wharton. He's the only professor in the history of Wharton that has fired Wharton, and he fired Wharton because he said exactly what is happening and why he loved Da Vinci is that because he said, you guys are screwing with the minds of the MBA students. And he then wrote a book called Learning Upside Down. And that's exactly what happens in Da Vinci. It's learning upside down. It's not going there and saying, here's the theory, by the way, the exam is going to be between page 30 to 100. If you know that, you'll pass the exam. When we teach on MBA, when I used to teach in MBA programs, the first question was, what's going to be in the exam? Well, as you know, in Da Vinci, at master's and PhD level, there are no exams. I just thought, just because I loved this man, Ackoff, had some wonderful experiences with him, but this was his mind. It's very, very interesting. He said, the righter we do the wrong thing, the wronger we become. He said, when we make a mistake doing the wrong thing and correct it, we become wronger. He said, when we make a mistake in doing the right thing and correct it, we become righter. Therefore, it's better to do the right thing wrong than the wrong thing right. And what his biggest contribution, which has been so exciting, because if you went now to those guys in the University of Pennsylvania and you sat in a Da Vinci room, you'd be seeing exactly the same things. The only difference is that you will spend about, 1.2 million rand getting a master's degree there, and about 100,000 rand getting a master's degree here, but you'll get the same stuff. So there's a lot of collaboration. So what we've done with them is that we have co-designed the next phase of systems thinking. And we start off and we do tell the students that you must not underestimate the challenges facing many, many organizations in South Africa about this notion of linear. Do it my way and you'll be okay. If you don't do, if you challenge the kind of reality in the organization, you'll probably get fired. And I think that's important. We start off all our systems and design thinking work, whether we are working with our students or whether we're working with organizations, talking about the Nguni legend, which says to us that, no matter how, this is the Sisyphus Mercanatus thorn tree, that you have this one thorn positively forward and pointing out towards the future, and behind each one of those is this nasty little hook thorn. And what does they say? No matter how far you look out to the future, you must never ever forget from where you've come from. So we are firmly rooted in the notion that you need to understand where you've come from. That systems thinking and design thinking is not a magical pill that's going to dissolve all your problems. It's a process that you have to understand fundamentally from where you've come from. We spend quite a lot of time talking about complexity, and we spend a lot of time talking about this notion of what we call wicked problems. And we also, talk about the classical guy like Deming, and Deming was actually never recognized in the United States of America. When he went over to Japan, he actually brought in the quality revolution. And he made some fundamental sort of important values and looked at how organizations can operate. And he said, look at the system in which individuals operate. Don't go and put a portion of blame to a particular individual. Classic, you all know this. Emphasize the fact that if you try and solve problems with the same mindset you created them, you'll just get yourself into a lot of trouble. And then, as I said, we spend quite a lot of time talking about wicked problems. And this is becoming more and more important. I submit, and what we say in the lectures is that perhaps there's no better country in the world for wicked problems. Every single day you open the newspaper, there are more and more wicked problems in this country. And it doesn't matter how much Benny and I have tried, and we say this openly to persuade the Zuma government and many of his ministers that they better start thinking about this country from a systemic point of view, they don't understand this. And so we try and create a discussion there, and we talk about wicked problems. You don't understand the problem, you develop a solution. They have no stopping rules, and each one of these has an interesting story to tell. There's no definite formulation. Solutions are true or false, but better or worse, and that the planner has no right to be wrong. And so we build on this notion that if you recognize within your business that you've got these highly complex problems, and it's extremely difficult to distill out. If you say, what's the problem, and there are 15 people in the room, all 15 are going to come out with different ideas and different concepts. And so we talk about this whole notion about a class of social system problems, and I want to reinforce that, because in Da Vinci we only talk about social systems which are ill-formulated, where the information is confusing, where there are many clients and decision makers with conflicting values, and where the ramifications of the whole system are thoroughly confusing. That's the thing.